The ideal world, obviously, is the world in which a woman ascends to the pinnacle of power in her home country, and the fact of her being a woman goes unremarked upon because it is considered unremarkable. Our world being far from ideal in this as in many other respects, it is remarkable that Japan is now led by a woman, and this explainer therefore proposes to remark upon it.
Takaichi Sanae 237.
Sanae Takaichi of the Liberal Democratic Party was sworn in as Prime Minister of Japan by Emperor Naruhito earlier this week. She takes over from Shigeru Ishiba, who led the LDP to victory in a general election just 12 months ago, but resigned after a sequence of subsequent poll defeats cost the LDP their majorities in both houses of Japan's parliament, the Diet, and Ishiba his authority. Takaichi won the subsequent LDP leadership vote, and though assembling a plausible coalition has been tough, the LDP's longtime partners, Komeito, deserted them, she has done it just about. The LDP will attempt a minority government in cahoots with the Japan Innovation Party, who are keen on digitisation, much less keen on regulation, maybe not altogether the annoying libertarian tech bros that description makes them sound, but still. Becoming the first female leader of any country is hard, as pathfinding always is. It is, or in Takaichi's case was, arguably harder in Japan than in most democracies. Japan, an overachiever in so many respects, is a reprehensible and obdurate underachiever where gender equality is concerned. In the most recent World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap Report, to cite one index, Japan ranked 118th out of 148 countries, slotting in just behind Comoros, Senegal and Angola. Of the 465 members of Japan's House of Representatives, just 73 of them, including Sanae Takaichi, are women, yet that is a record and by a considerable margin, clobbering the previous high of 54 returned at the general election of 2009.
ここからは国家国民のため全力で変化を恐れず
Sanae Takaichi is therefore a self-evidently unusual woman. She is 64 years old and has served in Japan's House of Representatives since 1993, one of 14 female members at that time, with a brief interruption between 2003, when she lost her seat in that year's general election, and 2005, when she won a different seat in that year's general election. She has served in a variety of ministerial posts, including internal affairs, science, innovation, food safety and gender equality, although where the latter portfolio is concerned, Takaichi has in common with one of her heroes, and now fellow first female Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, that the advancement and empowerment of women as a group does not seem an animating interest. She has, however, promised to appoint noticeable quantities of women to her cabinet, as opposed to Thatcher, who in more than a decade as Prime Minister appointed one. In Takaichi's pre-politics life, she worked as a political analyst and television newsreader. She is famously fond of cars and motorcycles and heavy metal. Given her generally hardline political proclivities, it is probably safe to assess that all the Iron Maiden jokes have already been done. She is reputedly a capable drummer and still practices at home on an electric kit, doubtless to the relief of her neighbours. What matters more now is the degree to which the term headbanger describes her as a politician as well as a musician. It is important to recall first of all that Japan's Liberal Democratic Party is one of those parties which endowed itself early on with a name which would become somewhat misleading, like the Liberal Party in Australia, which is actually conservative, and the Republican Party in the United States, which seems presently desperate to somehow crown King Donald I. The LDP tend conservative and nationalist and have often radiated the sense of born-to-rule entitlement which comes of having governed Japan for most of its post-World War II existence. Japan may have churned through prime ministers at a formidable clip of late, but of the 13 who have done the job since the turn of this century, 10 have been Liberal Democrats, and the 3 who weren't barely managed 3 years between them. Takaichi is generally reckoned to be firmly on the right of her party and indeed on the political spectrum generally. She favours reform of Japan's constitution, which is still the one imposed upon it by its American conquerors after World War II, specifically Article 9, which commits Japan to pacifism and the renunciation of force as a means of dispute resolution. This is not really that controversial and very arguably overdue. She has, however, visited the Yasukuni War Memorial Shrine in Tokyo, which among nearly 2.5 million others honours more than 1,000 convicted war criminals. Visiting Yasukuni has become a ritual for politicians wishing to portray themselves as pugnacious patriots and/or China hawks. Interestingly, Takaichi didn't go to Yasukuni, as might have been expected, during the autumn festival of last week, making a ritual offering instead. She knew that she was just about to become a global figure. Takaichi faces a number of stiff challenges: a sluggish economy, a demographic doom loop, a jittery neighbourhood. Her most fundamental one, however, is likely to be keeping her job. Without a parliamentary majority, her opponents get to choose what she can and cannot do. Long and difficult though her climb has been, it was, relatively speaking, the easy part. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller.